A lot of people swear by complementary medicines, but you need to be certain that it's regulated, that there is a body making sure that this particular form of treatment is appropriate and regulated.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Mary. And you can find more details on CFAX page 615.
Well, that's all for this series. Remember, a booklet with practical advice, including information about special needs, is still available. Further details in a moment.
We hope to see you again next year, so until then, goodbye.
Goodbye.
To get a copy of our booklet, please send a cheque for £3 made payable to BBC Education to Just One Chance, PO Box 7, London W12 8UD. Or to order by credit card, please phone 0990 100 789.
Next week at 8 o'clock, Decisive Weapons returns with a look at the Russian T-34 tank, a major player in the Second World War.
It's the telephone man. He says he wants to speak to Pilot Officer Vincent Miniver.
Hello.
Is that Mrs. Miniver's son?
You're speaking.
Is BBC 2 here? Would you like to see some classy war movies?
Why, of course, sir.
Well, jump to it, man. We've got Kenneth Moore.
I've got to fly again, old boy. Can't you understand that? I've simply got to.
Trevor Hart and John Mills.
These fighter types. Bad show.
Alec Guinness and Jack Hawkins.
There's always the unexpected, isn't there? Zulus to the southwest.
Michael Caine.
Yes, it's the British at War this Christmas on BBC 2.
This was their finest hour.
On BBC One now, Love on the Rocks and the setting of the sun for the holiday season. What does the future have in store for our holiday reps? Luke Skywalker has fought Death Star on Darth Vader, but nothing could prepare him for the Solomons. Third Rock from the Sun here on BBC Two in half an hour. First, it's that executive feel from Top Gear.
In tonight's Top Gear, will we ever love the Lexus? 2 new models from Toyota's flagship. Millions of megabytes, the cream of computer games. And the life and times of the taxi.
It's been a long time coming, but I know, change gotta go.
To come up with a luxury car brand that's really desirable takes an epoch. The people who invented the motor car in the first place, Mercedes-Benz, have toiled for over a century. Jaguar's been at it for 75 years, and BMW have managed to steal our hearts in a lightning 60. But what happens if you try it in just 8 years? You get a Lexus.
Now, when the first Lexus appeared on these shores in 1989, there were people in Coventry, Stuttgart and Munich that found themselves reaching for the Valium. 8 years on, and they're still having to take the tablets, because not only has Lexus just sold their 10,000th car in the UK, they've also revamped the GS300 and LS400 and are set to launch a BMW 3 Series competitor. Lexus, it would seem, are here to stay. But let me ask one question. Is the Lexus brand now good enough to lock horns with the big boys? Can they rub bumpers with BMW, Mercedes and Jaguar? But before we go any further, I'd better declare an interest. I'm now on my second LS400, and I'm here to tell you I'm mightily impressed. So smitten, in fact, that I hold this car in almost the same warm regard as I do a Mercedes-Benz.
What's going on? Yeah, what's going on? Tell me what's going on. I'll tell you what's going on. Ooh.
Yes, you heard me right, because in many respects, the £50,000 LS400 is as good as an S-Class, 7 Series, and even a Jaguar XJ6. In fact, in some ways, it's even better. Because not only is this car more refined than a Rolls-Royce, it's probably one of the best specified cars in the world. If I was to tell you everything that the LS400 has as standard equipment, we'd still be here in February. I've got an electric steering wheel, satellite navigation.
Proceed about 3 miles.
Electrically operated seat belts, electric heated memory seats, traction control, vehicle stability control. It is like a technological fun fair, and it's all absolutely standard.
And if the elevator tries to break you down, go crazy, punch a higher floor.
And what's more, the LS400 is actually quicker than a Merc 500 S-Class, a BMW 740 and a V8 Jag.
Don't think this is just another rotund Rotarian's car, a fat cat's limo. The LS400 may not be dauntingly handsome, but my goodness, it is quick. 60 comes up in 6.7 seconds, and if you've got a runway like this, you can wind it all the way up to 155 miles an hour. I've got my foot glued to the Axminster, and we are now doing 150 miles an hour. And I'm running out of runway.
Let's go crazy. Let's get nuts. Slip up there till they put us in trouble. Let's go.
And the GS300 is no shrinking violet either. It's got a 3-litre straight-six with intelligent variable valve timing and a seamless 5-speed auto. Top whack is 143, and it can steam to 60 in 8.3 seconds.
Inside the 300, you've got the same palatial level of specification as the 400. You've got your electric steering wheel, your leather trim, your heated electric seats, your 6-pack CD, your air conditioning, your traction control, your vehicle stability control, and even side airbags. But listen, at 34 grand for the SE, if you wanted a similarly spec'd Audi, you'd be looking at another 2 grand. 5 grand more for a similarly spec'd Jag, 3 grand more for a BMW with the same sort of gear, and a whopping 8 grand for the equivalent Mercedes. So what you're looking at here is a very, very large chunk of value.
The 300 may not be as good-looking, whisper-quiet or smooth-riding as the 400, but it more than compensates with its urgent, sweet-revving engine and crisp chassis response. This is a luxury car that can behave like a hot hatch. But look, I could witter on for hours. The real acid test is what do the punters think of Lexus's image compared to the major players.
They need to sell the image of their own vehicle as much as the others. I mean, to look at it and just to sit in it without driving it, it looks to be every bit as good.
I think it's still fairly exclusive. It's definitely competitive for the senior management market, and it's quiet, it doesn't shout about itself too much.
It's got an image problem because of its looks, but as far as quality goes, I don't think there's anything to touch it on the market.
They took on the American market and took it from nothing to take on Jaguar and Mercedes, to take it to almost the best selling car in America. And I think it's an absolute classic car.
The LS400 has been voted the top car in J.D. Power's American surveys 4 years running. The Yanks don't get as worked up as we do about leaping cats, 3-pointed stars and blue propellers. They know there's more to life than bonnet badges.
So let's go back to my original question. Can we take Lexus seriously? Well, in my opinion, yes. Because the LS400 is one of the most refined and sophisticated cars money can buy. It may not be the best luxury car in the world. That honour goes to the new Jaguar XJR. But it comes damned close. And I think you'll agree, that's not bad in 8 years flat.
What is the problem? Do I look like a nutter? Maybe it's me aftershave.
Taxi.
Well, I'm glad you came along when you did, although I have to say, this isn't quite what I was expecting. What on earth is it?
It's a Toyota Crown, straight from the streets of Tokyo.
What year is this thing? It looks about mid-70s, I'd say.
It looks a little bit dated, but in fact it's a 92. Plenty chrome on there, on the body, on the bumpers.
It's like an old Zodiac or Zephyr.
They're still making it. They make 2,500 of these, purely for the taxi trade.
In Tokyo, the number of people on the streets wearing masks means there's either terrible pollution or they really like Michael Jackson. Anyhow, city regulations require all cabs to run on propane.
Well, I'll tell you what, I like these antimacassars on the seats. I think they're a nice touch. It kind of reminds me of being in my granny's front parlour.
Yeah, I believe the Japanese men still wear brill cream.
Well, I don't. You're all right on that account.
Anyway, this is as far as I go, mate.
What?
Yeah, I think you'd better get it. I have another job on.
All right. Right, well.
Typical. You ring for a taxi and it turns up late. 60 years late.
Are you, is this a taxi?
Yeah.
Great. Oh, yes, this is very agreeable, much more me, I think. It's all very upstairs, downstairs, this, isn't it?
Yeah, this is a 1935 Austin Heavy 12 taxi cab, operated through London during the war up to mid-1950s. The total cost in 1935 was about £395. For that kind of money, you could buy a decent house in London.
I've noticed that I get a very good deal in the back of here. It's all polished wood and lovely deep button leather, but you're not quite so well accommodated in the front, are you?
Well, you're paying for it.
How much am I paying? Let me have a look at the meter. 2 and 6 already, good grief. Did they always have meters in taxis?
Yeah, when they brought out the first motorised taxi cabs, that's when they introduced the taximeters.
I have a confession. Unlike most taxi drivers who know absolutely everything about absolutely everything, I know nothing about taxis.
Yeah, I know a man who knows all about taxis. In fact, he lives here.
Does he? Right.
And he's got an amazing private collection of cabs.
I know you. You've been having me on. You're going to tell me all about taxis then, are you?
Come in, have a look around.
All right.
They paved paradise, put up a parking lot with a pink hotel, a boutique, and a swinging hot spot.
Ray, where does this passion for taxis come from?
I was brought up, from a youngster within the cab trade, and I can remember, from the age of 14, sitting in my father's FX3, being driven to school, and I helped to restore it. And from then on, I just got more deeply and deeply involved, and, as you get more involved, you want to go farther back. My favourite is probably a 35 Austin, which I found about 18 years ago. It's probably the most original example of a pre-war cab in existence. A lot of them are broken for spares, and that's a sad thing. Others fell into the hands of students. They ended up on farms, on derelict land. Some went abroad with American GIs.
But there's a taxi that I've always wanted to drive. Do you have a checker?
I think we've got one tucked away in a corner. You'll have to search around and find it.
Oh, yes. You you could forget your Mustangs and Macs, your Corvettes and Cadillacs. This, a Checker cab made by the Checker Motor Corporation of Kalamazoo, Michigan, is surely the ultimate wheeled icon of Americana. To beat it, I reckon you'd have to stick the Statue of Liberty on roller skates. I've always wanted to drive one, and now that I have, I can tell you what it's like. It's like driving a big yellow tank. The thing weighs 3 tons and has a 4-litre V6, which means it isn't exactly nippy. But it has a strange habit of arriving in places first. I mean, would you pull out on one of these? It's straight out of the movies. There's a sticker in the back saying, passengers are asked to refrain from screaming at the driver by order of the New York City Police Department. If you fancy one, then one in this sort of condition costs you about £10,000. But you could pick up a war-torn example with 413 not-so-careful owners straight off the streets of Manhattan for around £3,000.
You know, I think I've sorted out my small difficulty from this morning. From now on, catching a cab will be no trouble, because I'm going to keep this one. Yes, it only gets 8 miles to the gallon, but it makes me feel like Robert De Niro.
Uh-oh, we're in trouble. Something's come along and it's burst our bubble. Uh-oh, we're in trouble. Gotta get home quick, march on the
Yes, he's at it again. Jeremy's been globetrotting, and the result is a brand new series coming your way in January. It's called Jeremy Clarkson's Extreme Machines, and when he says extreme, he means it.
How to describe this thing? Well, look at it this way. A supercharged V8 water pump nestling in a soap dish. Whoa! Sitting on your porch with a nice glass of single malt. It's important to have a lot of cherished memories, but this boat is going to make pretty damn sure that I don't get to be old. I find it very difficult to explain to you what these turns are like. I mean, extraordinary G-force that you have to lift off going down the straight so you can get the power on and must have steering when you go through the corners. Oh wow, this is a seriously glorious machine.
So if you want to see more horsepower than you ever dreamed of, be there at the usual Top Gear slot, 8:30 Thursday, BBC 2, starting January the 8th. You have been warned.
When the Beatles recorded Day Tripper in 1965, another Fab Four, the Walklet brothers in sleepy Suffolk, were building a tiny, giant killer of a kit car.
For racing enthusiasts, the Ginetta G4 was the car to have in the 60s. You could drive it to work in the week and race it at the weekends. And the hotter version would thrash the pants off E-Types, Cobras and 250 LM Ferraris.
Which is a 1500cc, and it's also mated to the Cortina 68 G4 has been in the same ownership for the last 15 years, leading a hard life as a speed hill climb and sprint competition car.
Because this car sprints, it's got most of its punch low down the rev range, which is just lovely. It handles beautifully. It's got such a perfectly engineered feel to it. It's a real surprise that it's a kit car. This car is older than me. It's just over 30 years old. And it's absolutely stunning today. So I can only imagine what it was like when it was new in the 60s. Gave the E-Type a run for its money.
In '69, when the G4 was dropped in favour of more up-to-date G numbers, its legend lived on into the 70s and 80s in historic racing and international rallying. By the 90s, the Japanese passion for Brit Retro was to keep the mark alive.
That was fantastic. And now some good news for Ginetta fans. They stopped making the G4 in the late 60s, though for the last 5 years it has been built and exported to Japan. Well, for those of you who missed it first time round, it's back on sale in the UK. This is the new Ginetta G4.
Since the rebirth of this sexy little racer, Japan has imported 200 so far, and in true Brit tradition, the modern-day samurai use the cars as weekday commuters and weekend racers in their own championship.
This is not a stripped-out racer like the old car, though it does have this chrome roll cage and a few creature comforts, such as carpets and adjustable seats, and it's even got a heater.
What's the matter with the clothes I'm wearing? Can't you tell that your tie's too wide? Maybe I should buy some old tab collars. Welcome back to the age of jive. Where have you been hiding out lately, honey? You can't dress as flashy till you spend a lot of money.
This Ginetta G4 remains true in design to the original, though it's built to 90s spec.
What's the matter with the car I'm driving?
You can actually feel that it's got some suspension, rather than the original, which was pretty rock solid.
Should I get a set of white wall tires? Are you gonna cruise them?
The original G4 is quite rigid and quite twitchy, whereas this one is a lot more supple. And any oversteer movements can be corrected quite nicely.
Even if it's old junk, it's still rock and roll to me.
The power comes in further up the rev range compared to the old car, and it has a 5th gear, which makes motorway driving more comfortable.
There's a new rain in town, but you can't get the sound.
It's got a very fruity noise. So fruity, in fact, that I'm going to have to stop and look under the bonnet.
How about a pair of pink sidewinders and a bright orange pair of pants?
We don't often look at engines on top gear, but this one is interesting enough to definitely have a look.
Don't waste your money on a new set of speakers. You get more miles.
This is Ford's 1.8-litre Z-Tech engine with 145 brake horsepower, and unusually it's fitted with twin Weber 45s, carburettors that were actually fitted to the original G4. Fruity.
The Ginetta G4 is no longer a kit car, and more importantly, it doesn't have a kit car feel to it. It is beautifully engineered, but the original 60s price has risen from 500 notes to £28,600 for this Z-Tech model, a whopping £6.5 grand more than a Lotus Elise. The 35-year-old design is still as gorgeous as it ever was, but you'll have to dig deep for this 60s classic.
This is huge fun, and I think I'll just take it home.
After a hard season's racing, there's nothing better than getting home. To put your feet up by the fire. To look forward to some quality Christmas television, like The Sound of Music, The Great Escape. Ah, and of course, Morecambe and Wise. And then you remember you've got children and they've got video games. Mind you, it's not necessarily all bad news because... kids! Kids! I've got the Antiques Roadshow on upstairs. Some of the latest games provide some pretty realistic indoor motorsport. Game consoles have come on a bit in the last couple of years. Their graphics and detailing are now almost on a par with those available on home computers. You can set up things like steering, tyres and transmission to suit your personal preference. Crashes make you feel like you're having a crash. It rains and it feels like it's raining. And you get to race on real racing tracks. In order to get on board and start lapping up the action, you'll need to begin by getting a console. And the big three are the Sony PlayStation, the Sega Saturn, and the Nintendo 64. Contenders ready?
3, 2, 1, go!
Now this Sega Rally, this is something we've all seen before, we all know how to play it, it's been around for what seems like ages, and it's still great fun to race on. But the cars are now getting a bit out of date. This steering wheel just adds that lovely touch of reality. It's these jumps in the Sega Rally that make you feel as if you're right on board. Oof, you almost feel the bumps, but it comes back down to earth again. Ah. But my time's up. Time's up? What do you mean my time's up? I haven't finished yet.
On your mark. Go!
This karting, like the Sega Rally, really does get you involved. It gets you racing against the competition. And whilst you don't need to brake hardly anywhere, which is not that realistic, and I keep changing my view because this thumb where I've got the throttle is right next to the view change, nobody seems to brake for any corners, and we hit each other all the time. Oh. The only problem is it sounds like I'm racing a sewing machine. I think I've just finished second. I'm getting better. Right, now we've moved to the Nintendo 64 console. We've plugged in F1 pole position. We've plugged in this Gamester steering wheel, which gives me pedals so I can accelerate and brake just like a real Grand Prix driver. And I'm a bit disappointed, to be honest. The graphics are a bit dated. There's no real warning of where the circuit's coming. It's nothing like as much straightforward fun as that Sega was. And the skill factor is a bit of an applied art rather than anything that would come naturally as a driver. I spent more time bouncing off the walls than staying on the track. It's just not a very sophisticated game. I'm glad real racing isn't this difficult. Right, onto the Sony PlayStation. I've got a Mad Cat steering wheel and pedals. And with this F197, I can start playing and drive around without falling off on every straight. I've got brake marker boards, I've got good graphics, and it's just not oversensitive, it's sensible. You can drive this car. The only thing missing is a good onboard view, but the driver lineups are exactly as they were this season, and the tracks are absorbingly realistic and require maximum concentration. This is just qualifying. Probably the most realistic of these console games that I've discovered is this latest touring car championship on the Sony PlayStation. Well, I've got a sequential gearbox, just like a real thing. And when you go on board with the driver, every time you punch for another gear, the hand comes off the steering wheel to change. Mind you, they have strange-looking hands. Come on, Warwick, get out of my way. Come on. Down to the hairpin. Fourth, third, lock over, power on. You clip the curb, the car rocks and broncos. If you go off onto the gravel, there's noise underneath, and when you start hitting Tim Harvey and Paul Radisich, there's lovely fender-bending noises, and it really is just like touring cars. But however realistic these computer games get, they'll never be quite the same as the real thing.
Next week, I'll be helping to decide on Top Gear's Car of the Year with Jeremy and Tiff, which will be hard because we can't agree on anything. And how the Crims kept pace with Plod. 40 years of blue lights and getaway cars.
The BBC would like to hear your views on any of their programmes about hobbies and pastimes. Please write to us with your comments at Hobbies and Pastimes, PO Box 17230, London W12 6PH. Or you can email us at hobbies.leisure@bbc.co.uk. And further details can be found on CFAX, page 598.
Are things what they seem? Good evening. My name's Anthea Turner. We're going to discover the truth. And what's more, we're going to discover the truth behind the truth. And if there's anything behind that, we'll discover that as well.
Paul Merton unravels the unexplained in Does China Exist? Monday at 10 on BBC Two.
Or is it?
You just talked to him. And was he looking forward?
Apparently, she used to have like this crush on me.
Boy meets girl. Keep away from me, please.
Do you want to say that again? You didn't get quite enough of my eye.
Oh, she's hot. Gorgeous body. Good work.
It happens all the time.
Any danger of a coffee?
What happens next is their business.
I can hear your heartbeat.
Until she takes him to court.
You will be lied to.
I tried to say that there wasn't going to be any.
I'm not guilty.
Continuing the Love Bite season in your dreams. Sunday at 10:15 on BBC Two.
Greenpeace has warned the public about catastrophic dumping of waste in the world's oceans. But were the warnings based on scientific fact or emotion? Scare Stories investigates in 25 minutes. Now on BBC Two, in a battle between Luke Skywalker and Sally Solomon, who do you think would win? Yep, no contest.
I just cannot believe that they moved us to this lousy table.
Ugh, you can see the ice in the urinals for crying out loud.
That's it. I'm gonna go talk to the guy in the monkey suit and find out what the hell's going on.
Well, everybody, I'd like to propose a toast.
No, Harry, let me. To someone who has been an inspiration to us all, and a beacon of light in a dark and ominous fog of mediocrity, to me. I've been immortalized.
Yep. It's not just anybody who gets to be in the Pendleton yearbook.